Hello, everyone. Welcome to this stream. I'm glad to see some of you there watching on YouTube. Today is the release, as we've been saying, of a Mosquito touch. Now, this is a project that I've been working along with Alex McLeod and Arie Verheul over the past few months of the summer, creating something digital that we can share with you and create new works, new music, new artwork, and to share with you as we can online. So we're gonna get into a bit more talking about that and explaining maybe a bit the project, but I want the main event to be the main event, and we're going to start with a showing of this beautiful video and this beautiful music that had a really challenging and exciting and fun time learning and putting together. So, if we're all ready, then we can cue up the video and get started with Mosquito Touch. Just a side note, actually, my Theorbo's right here. And I was, just while we were pausing there before it started, I was tuning up and there's a little bug on my string and I thought it was a mosquito. But it flew away before I could see what it was. So it was visiting us.
A high probability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now when I play the video, do I mute myself?
Yeah. We're gonna disappear, our videos are gonna disappear, our voices are gonna disappear, and the video is going to be playing.
So I'll get her going.
Let's go.
Awesome.
I'm not going to get her going. Jonathan has to enable screen sharing for me.
Excuse me.
This is the excitement of live broadcast. It's wild. You know, we can rehearse how we want to, but you know, when it comes down to it,
gotta get it in the moment.
This is why we do things like
you can't even blame the AV technician.
Oh,
okay.
There you go. You're good now.
Here we go.
Awesome.
All right. I love watching it again. It's beautiful every time.
Sorry about
Yeah.
the false start there. Just had to wet your whistle a little bit with the silent version of it.
Oh yeah, we got a little preview of what was gonna happen. We could guess with the music, or did it fool some people?
Yeah.
Is this the piece? Is this the piece? It is very quiet at the beginning. I was like,
Yeah, it did fool me for a little bit, I have to say, and I wrote it, so I feel like I should know.
Amazing. So yeah, that's Mosquito Touch. That's the video that we've been working on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the process of putting that together in just a little bit. And we also want to make sure, like I'm watching the YouTube stream as well, so I'm seeing your comments in there. So if you have anything you want to share or questions or anything, we'll totally get to those. First, I kind of want to share a bit of the background in terms of the musical idea, in terms of the instrument idea, really. Being an early music performer myself, playing a lot on theorbo, I really wanted some contemporary repertoire for this instrument and began searching. And Arie, amazingly and wonderfully, wrote for this instrument. And this is going to be an ongoing thing, a large project that I'm wanting to put together in terms of building the repertoire for this instrument that has been not written for in about 400 years. If you're interested, I can share you a list of all the pieces that I've found, which is less than 10. But I'm going to play one of those pieces because there are other composers who are daring to write for this instrument right now. And this is another thing I'd like to share with you. So now live audio, which we'll see, make sure we can hear. I'm going to play a piece by German composer Clemens K. Thomas. It's called, now it's in German, so I gotta make sure I pronounce it right by reading the title. Ich bin ein Plum und bin gehessen Flos Campi, which translates to I am a plum and my name is Flos Campi, or Rose of Sharon. So this is a really cool piece, and I've grown to understand the sort of thematic workings of how it plays, and it's changed my interpretation a lot over the time it's taken me to learn it. So I'm going to play this for you so you get another idea of what's going on in the contemporary theorbo world right now. So just bear with me while I adjust the angle and sit down and tune this thing a little bit. So that's another recent piece by Clemens K. Thomas. And with that, you've heard a sizable chunk of the repertoire for the theorbo written since 1700. So congratulations on getting all of that repertoire in. Again, just thank you all for turning out and listening. I'm reading some comments here now. Yep. Thanks for everyone. And I believe the sound, was this is the kind of first time coordinating how Zoom works through other applications and doing a Zoom for a stream. And we were kind of lucky that Zoom yesterday updated their audio to be slightly better if I'm playing music in this high fidelity audio mode. So I'm glad that this is able to come across a bit easier. So I want to get into a bit of talking about this. I mean, you've seen and heard a lot of new things, and if you have any questions, as I said before, please feel free to ask. But I'm going to just get us started with a bit of discussion about this project between the three of us. We've been meeting entirely online over the past few months to coordinate putting this together, creating the music, learning the music, recording the music, making the videos, editing the music, mixing the music. And, this was kind of a time where we had time to do it together, but as all of us know, living in the global pandemic, we didn't have a lot of opportunities to all get together and, crunch heads and think about how this is doing. So we used a lot of this, as many of us are now, adapting to that. But first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about the instrument. As I said before, an instrument that hasn't been written for a lot. And I'm wondering what both of you, your thoughts were on working with the theorbo. Maybe Arie, apparently we learned in one of our sessions, is probably the one who's known about the theorbo for the longest, even though I'm the one who plays it. Because you said, it's been a lifelong dream to play right for the theorbo. Can you talk about that?
Oh, Big time. Well, my hobby when I was like 16, my hobby was going on YouTube and like looking up like weird instruments. So I was like for a while there in like, the early 2010s, like the weird instrument part of YouTube was very small. There were maybe like 40 or 50 videos there total, and I knew all of them. I had seen every single one. And and I found the Theorbo, I think. It might have even been through this. There was this old website that is still up from the 90s called contrabass.com, which is like a list of all of the low instruments, which is, it's one of those places that you visit and it reminds you of like, people's personal HTML websites from like that era.
No, yeah, that reminds me.
I was really, yeah.
That's a feeling.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And I became really fascinated with the Theorbo because it's just like this huge, it's one of those things like sort of impossible feeling objects. It's sort of this massive version of something that looks fairly regular, like a lute is like a shape that you're maybe familiar with from like, representations of the like what medieval music was like or like movies and things like that. But then it has this like massive thing sticking out of it and it's 6 feet tall and it feels like it feels very strange and alien in a lot of ways. And I think that's what drew it to me at first. And then learning more about it from Jonathan, learning like what actually makes it such an unusual and interesting instrument. After I found out you play the Theorbo. Like I remember when I found out, I knew you, Jonathan, before you started playing the Theorbo, and then I remember when we reconnected once and I learned that you had started playing it. That was a very exciting moment for me because that's when I knew it might be possible. Like my chance to write for the Theorbo might come true. Yeah, that's my learning about the Theorbo story right there.
Yeah, well, here you've seen it.
So how did you come
to me?
Yeah,
Well,
how did you come across it, Jonathan? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Theorbo, the first time that I saw Theorbo, I thought well, actually, no. I was very confused about what instruments they were. I saw an arch flute first, and I thought I knew something about lutes, and I was like, yeah, because I listened to some Baroque lute music by Sylvius Weiss and Bach lute suites, and I looked that up and said, it's a D minor tuning. And when I was studying at McGill has an arch flute in their early music department, and I picked it up and was like, yes, I know how this is tuned. And I tuned it totally wrong, and I don't know who had it next, but they were probably very, very confused. But I mean, lute was something I was aware of, when I was starting classical guitar when I was a teenager, and the first early music I played was John Dowland, which was actually the first time I collaborated with Alex. We were doing some John Dowland presentations. He was doing some animations for that. So I was playing that on the classical guitar, so I had an idea about the Renaissance lute. And then the Theorbo just kind of popped up. When I was studying at McGill, I took a continuo class, which is based on Baroque style accompaniment. And I took my classical guitar to that, and eventually that transformed into a Baroque guitar, and eventually that transformed into Theorbo, which is kind of a all-around a good versatile continuo instrument. So I came in through the I want to accompany more people, I want to play more in ensemble, and then suddenly, this is a very cool instrument. I'm going to start playing that. And that was that. But that was definitely more recently than when you discovered the Theorbo art. Yeah. Mentioning with John Dowland, that was the first time I met you, Alex. Working on the Dowland songs at the Division Gallery.
Yeah, about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
That's wild. Because like for me, it was all about like expanding people's like we're so isolated and siloed in our own communities, where it's like the visual artists go to visual art openings, and the dance people go to dance things, and a lot of people don't know what's happening. So for me, I was like, let's put on a performance. Let's have opera in our art gallery. Let's have a lutenist come through. Lots of people were like, I don't even know what a lute is. And that was amazing for me because it was not only a creative expression, but it was also an opportunity to be educated. and to like open up and be like, hey, like this is happening in our city, and this is just regular, you know.
Yeah.
So we would have just blown their minds if we had a Theorbo show up in a gallery. Don't, yeah.
Well, I mean, the gallery's big enough. I mean, there's more.
I mean,
room for
yeah,
it
like
than
honestly, like it would look kind of probably okay in that gallery, but yeah, just the concept of having these like beautiful old instruments that don't have like a lot of contemporary contexts, you know. And I think that's what excited me so much about contributing a video to this, is like, oh cool, like maybe the people that like follow my work and are interested in what I'm doing would be like, oh, why do I keep seeing this word? What is a theorbo? They look it up. They're like, oh my God, there's all these instruments that they may have never heard about, or they, you know, like didn't feel like they were allowed to. And sometimes it's just about like allowing ourselves to explore something new and exciting, you know?
Yeah, totally. That was like a huge part of the impetus for me to ask you to be part of the project too, and to bring these different art forms together, and also put, you know, this old instrument in contemporary frame, but at the same time putting all this contemporary stuff in the frame of the sound of the old music too. It gives us sort of this universal idea, and it's something that I realize a lot studying early music and looking back in history, is that, you know, if people were thinking many of the same things back then, and maybe hearing different sounds because there's different materials that were making them, but we can still go through very, very similar processes, which is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of composing for the theorbo, though, Arie, your piece was very challenging for me because you brought new ways of playing to the theorbo that no one has ever asked anyone to do before. As all of you would have heard in basically the first 4 minutes, I'm not really playing and even past that, I'm not really playing the theorbo in a conventional way. I'm using a lot of muting with my palm and playing and making unpitched sounds or random improvised sounds just on the low strings on the extended neck. Watch my music standard. And then having to coordinate that with some measured bass lines was very challenging for me, but you managed to bring away the instrument sounds that hadn't been heard before, and that I found really enchanting, especially when suddenly there's this harmonic shimmer that shows up. I don't know, can you talk a bit about your experience and some of the ideas that came to you writing for this instrument and what came out?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, that brings up so many different threads for me. I think that like for me, like I find I'm really interested in objects, and especially like the way that we make objects that we interact with and the way that we interact with those objects. So that's what sort of is exciting to me about instruments. So when I I remember this because this was during a tour that I was on with Jonathan, and we were about to play our last show, and we were on this beautiful island in the St. Lawrence, and you had your theorbo there, and that was actually the first time I had encountered one in person, and just sort of playing with it and experimenting with it in my hands was like this really strange experience, because like as a string player, you're used to a certain sort of configuration. Like to a certain extent, all like Western string instruments are kind of the same thing, or at least like fretted ones that you use you put your fingers down on the strings on. They're all the same thing. Like you have like a box, you have the strings, you have the like stuff that you put your hand down on and you change the pitches. And the theorbo kind of is this sort of fundamentally different way of approaching that sort of shape of using your hands and that shape of like interacting with an object. So I was really interested, I think, in finding what was unique about that, and that was part of the opening is a particular way of interacting with the diapason strings, the strings that are the longest strings that go all the way out to the out into the stratosphere, and I was really interested in like finding out how like that sort of different ways that you could interact with that with your body in the way that you're playing with it. Because normally, like the use for that, the intended use is that it's like these are drone strings. You play it kind of like a harp. It's meant to be a sort of self accompaniment. But how can we take this object and like find the things in it that are kind of a little strange and inconsistent, and how can we like explore those and experiment with them?
Mhm.
That might be my answer. That'll be my answer today.
Yeah, I love it. I totally felt a new kind of tactile relationship with my instrument after working on this, and that was really cool to experience. And it gives you new sounds, and even listening to that when I actually recorded it and listening back to it and hearing how that actually affects what's going on harmonically in terms of what's resonating was really, really fascinating. So that was pretty great. I actually want to share a picture of you because with everyone here, since you mentioned where we were on this island in the St. Lawrence River, and I got sent a photo from there yesterday or the day before, and it was kind of uncannily reminding me of the video that Alex made. And I mean, we'd mentioned how, some water stuff, how Arie and I were both on this island when we originally thought about it. And then Alex, your animation just kind of perfectly captured what was in my mind when I was doing that without even having to talk about it. So just so you can all see, this is like a view from the island.
Yeah.
And like that green, that water, it's like...
It was so wild when you sent that to me, because it's like everything is process based. I might have like an image in my head, and we were talking about water, so I'm like, okay, is it still water? Is it ocean water? Is it river water? There's so many different types of water, and then is it an abstract version of like the ripple on something that doesn't look like water but is referencing water? And just to like have no idea what this looked like, and then to produce even the lighting. Like
yeah.
it's wild. It's like the same time of day. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. The universe is like, the algorithms are working.
We had to do that. Yeah, so like that was pretty cool. So I saw it and I said, yeah, this is perfect. So yeah, I really loved seeing that. And the video too. Like we'd also talked about different ways of how the video and audio can be accompaniment either to each other or and I mean, Arie is a film composer, having worked in that medium, you're very used to that. And I remember in one of our sort of sessions discussing where to go, Alex, you mentioning how you were learning to work with accompanying the music in terms of visuals. And I don't know what your relationship to that is. What do you think? Yeah.
It's usually like, you hear something and it's I don't want to say it's like synesthesia, but it's like something will trigger something else, and it's generally probably like a memory that I've had, or like something that happens, a texture. It's like, oh well, we can commonly equate certain sounds to certain visual textures, or like like tactile textures, and I think sometimes it's easier than others. Sometimes you hear something and you're like, yeah, this is exactly what's happening. Like the video I did for Chamberfest with Megan and Juan, I did that like over a weekend because like I heard the piece first time and I'm like, oh, this is what it's gonna be. And like I started working right away, and then it just came out and I was like, whoa, like that's wild. This piece, I was like, I cannot put my finger on it. This is so strange for me. I do not know how to approach it. It's so like, and it's so wonderful to be challenged like that, because it's not only being challenged by like an early music instrument, but like a contemporary score for this instrument. So it's like these two things that are like on their own, I would have been able to handle maybe, but like together, it's like I was like, wait, I don't have any context. I've never heard this before. Like I don't know what to do. So thank you for challenging me in a way I'd never been challenged before.
Yeah, I mean, nobody had ever heard this before, so I mean, it was amazing.
I have to say, like, and the way you're talking about that reminds me so much of like experiences I've had trying to fit sound to images, it's like actually can be such a strange thing to be doing, because you're like on sometimes it's like immediately clear. You just see something and you know exactly what it sounds like. And then other times it's like you kind of have to really like, it's like you're like pushing through the mud to kind of figure out like what does this actually sound like. And it's even, I mean, in English, like we don't really have a great vocabulary to talk about sound. I mean, it is what it is and it works. But like we're only talking through metaphors. Um, and I find that like one of the things I really love about working with people who like work in visual in like the visual realm, like artists and filmmakers, is that uh, like that's a world where people tend to have a different vocabulary around sound than us. And I think as musicians, we get really caught up in like sort of finding ways to communicate that are clear to each other, that we forget a certain relationship with sound that's maybe a little bit more uh, vague and a little bit more like emotional, like within our own training. So it's really lovely to sort of get out and like work with people and talk and try and like explain what we're thinking outside of our own little like jargon.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely, and it helps. I've definitely had conversations with friends and colleagues and other musicians about interpreting a piece, and do you picture images as sounds and different things when you're working on that. And I mean, at least working on this, I had the advantage is like, oh, someone's composed this and we had some things in mind, and now I'm working on it and I'm seeing the ideas that Alex has put out. When I perform this live, on a concert stage someday when that happens again, it's totally going to be informed by this experience and the visuals and the sounds that we've created this way. So that's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I guess kind of also being totally a digital project was something that I've never sort of done from start to finish before. And it was totally new territory, doing this kind of distance stuff and also recording myself and finding all of that. And it was definitely a big step in terms of learning the ropes of the software and all of that together. So I mean, you guys have been amazing helping me make this work, putting some amazing material into this. But yeah, it was. I hope to be able to perform this live soon, and the first part of the piece is actually improvised, and it might be interesting to show you a bit what that score looks like. But I'm wondering how in the future, if I can still manage to coordinate a bit of that improvisation with the video that we've created as a separate product. Yeah. But if I show you,
that's kind of like a sort of an interesting thing when it's like the sort of like you make a score and the idea is that it's like when you make a score, it's sort of it takes a sound and it sort of crystallizes it. It makes it sort of permanent in a way. And then one of the nice things about writing an improvised section is that it kind of depermanentifies it. It makes it something that can be separate and different and new every time. But then when you record something, it's sort of another layer of permanence and like sort of way that like the music then just exists in that form. Like especially if it's the first recording of something, then it's like if anyone ever performs this again, now there's a reference and now there's something to like go back and listen to as an example of how to interpret this notation. And then now especially that there's a video that's responding to like that recording of it. It's I don't know, I don't have a conclusion, but it's something kind of interesting about this weird way that you're working as a composer, making somebody a PDF so that they read off of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially your way of, as you said, of working with the reality of what an instrument is, and you're talking about it's like just a thing that we push our fingers down and a piece of wood, and talking more about the textural part and the the physical feeling of the instrument is interesting the way that you notate it. So this is basically the first 4 minutes of the piece right here that I'm showing you now. And you can see it gets measured about halfway down the page, but Arie's written different ways to visualize a kind of improvisation that I can do using these textural ideas, which just looks really cool. I mean, look very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of a difficult thing, especially like you're sort of. It's really great. I mean, it was great working with you, Jonathan, because I knew you and like you were there and I could have a conversation with you about this piece. But like so much of the reason that you write something down is so that it's unambiguous and particular, and so that it can be universal. So like you mean universal for like people who read notation. And it is honestly kind of a strange way to communicate intention to somebody else. It's sort of a weird way of working that's very separate and I think very different from most other musical traditions in a lot of ways. But then you kind of try and do this thing that's like a little out of the box, and it's sort of tricky to conceive of what that, like why you're doing that. I don't know. I've lost my own train of thought halfway through this thing, but notation is like this is the forever conversation. You can talk about notation forever. And like these boxes and like diamonds, it was sort of like when you're asking somebody to improvise, there's so many ways you can do it. Like you can sort of say like these are the parameters that like I'm imagining, but like I'm also, the reason that I would want to include improvisation in a piece is because I really want input from somebody else. So it becomes kind of this thing of like, how can I make something that's like the right amount of vagueness and the right amount of specificity that'll really communicate like the level of control that I want to have over what the piece is, and how much control I want to give to the person who's reading and who's interpreting the instructions I've written, which is tricky and something that I'm sort of constantly trying to learn how to do properly. It's a very weird thing about this particular collaborative method of writing a score.
Yeah, and it was also challenging because we did this all distance, that you actually never got to come here and hear it in person. The only audio that you heard was the recorded stuff. We had one question asking if I could show what actually I was doing in those sections. Thanks for that question, Sarah. Just to quickly show you once more that section on the score, and then I can show you a bit what I did on the theorbo to make those solutions, and these are some ideas that Arie and I shared together. So here, share. So in this section, you see like beginning, when especially the beginning was very soft, and it was a bit of clicking and thumping sounds. So the solutions that I found, now if I switch back to my video here, I can show you actually what I'm doing on the theorbo. I'll stay close enough to the camera here so you can see my fingers. So he's asked to mute and play unpitched sounds on the diapasons, which are these top, or the bottom 7 strings here. And so for the first part, the solution we found was to mute about here, and it was actually something that changed because when I first started working on this, I was playing on a different instrument, which was actually quite a bit smaller, and I found there was a lot less pitch when I muted. Rather with this one, which is much longer, you still actually get quite a bit of pitch even if I'm just muting the strings like this. So some solutions at the beginning to be very subtle is actually to mute and pluck on this side. So, and also, Arie gave me some inspiration. We actually talked a bit about how we experience the sound coming towards us. Him as a violist, Arie's hearing the sound in his ear, and me hearing the sound come up here, but the real sound is going out there. The real sound is the sound from the sound hole. So I was learning with new ways to kind of caress the string, pluck the string, and go up and down in different unpitched ways. And we get into the next measure, which is a few minutes later in the piece, after we kind of show everyone that this is a theorbo. Then it's more about playing around with how I can mix different harmonics in. So still muting, and sometimes also, to get less pitch, muting with both the right and the left hand. And then finally, when I had to coordinate muting pitches and then playing unpitched or harmonic sounds at the same time, was the very difficult part for me to learn, Arie. But it was definitely worth it. I love the effect that creates.
I have to say, I wanted to really lean into the awkwardness of the instrument, and I really appreciate that you leaned into it and really worked on that section, because it's one of those things where it's kind of I was writing it and I was like, this is gonna be hard, and the fact that you sort of took it and like really turned it into something really amazing, something that I didn't expect it to sound the way it did. It was really amazing. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it did take a long time to kind of figure out a musical trajectory for that, because at first it was a lot of like, I've got to learn this new technique and I don't know how to fit different voices in here. So that was a unique challenge for sure. So that was really great, and yeah, I'm very happy with how that came out. Also, quick answer to that. This theorbo. Yes, I bought this theorbo back in January. It's been a while. I've been coasting off of borrowing theorbos. I've been studying at schools, and they've had instruments, and that's been great. But finally got this big one, and it sounds beautiful. I bought it kind of, and I didn't have it for a few months because it was on a different continent. But here it is. You heard it today. Yeah.
Alex, can I ask you something? I'm just like, I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about what it's like to sort of have the sound, especially something where you don't have like an intuitive answer for what it should look like, what it's like to sort of try and make visuals to accompany that sound. Like what does that process look like for you?
I think it's about finding an entry point. And for me, you know, we were talking about the water as an entry point. And I think it was kind of like a bit of a couple false starts, because I was like, okay, well, I can render this lake, and then hope that everything comes to build itself around it. And then I was like, no, it's not. It's just a lake, and it's not doing anything. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna think about the instrument, because I love the idea of reimagining what you're hearing. You know, and in the piece for Chamberfest, it was like Juan's clarinet. I like reimagined it as this like fantastical thing that was kind of like a I don't know, just kind of, but still looked like a clarinet. So I was like, okay, well, I love the roses in lutes and theorbos. Let's see if we can build something like that that's generative. Like, they are roses, they're flowers. Like, a lot of ornamentation are nature, and they're always static representations, carvings of this. What if we reimagine the idea of that by actually having nature or like the organic grow these forms, right? So then I was like, okay, cool. So like I did a bunch of that, and I'm like, all right, what if we put the lake behind it? So it's as if you're the inside the instrument looking out, or the instrument is, you are part of the instrument. And just like reimagining your place in the whole world. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the image when
Yeah.
you that still that we had at the beginning before we went on is what the first thing that you sent to us when you had rendered something, and I was like, it's like looking into my Theorbo and seeing exactly what I want to see all the time. I love this.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Usually when you look through the rows of the Theorbo, it's like, I just gotta make sure I can spell the luthier's name correctly, but it's really dimly lit in there and I can't read the stickers.
I was really fascinated by these YouTube videos of people that have put their iPhones in the sound hole and they play notes on the string, just like open notes.
Right.
And I guess because the frame rate of an iPhone or the light conditions, you can actually see the string, like see the waveform. And I'm like, whoa, this is wild. So I kind of wanted to capture that kind of idea as well, like seeing the strings move in a way that you don't see strings move, and just like revealing the unknown. I mean, that's the gift that artists can give.
Yeah. It totally felt very connected to like the historical strings too, because actually a lot of actually I think most lute players are playing with synthetic strings now. I mean, they could be reliable in terms of tuning. I definitely got string camp, and the thing what you notice when you use those strings, and I've replaced like the bottom two strings, and so since they're very very long and they're rather thick and made out of gut, you can actually sometimes see that string on the wavelength. And so when I'm watching my A string, in the first measure where you hear an unmuted string in Arie's piece, it totally looks like that.
That's cool.
Which is very cool.
Nice.
Yeah. I kind of love that this, in a way, this whole process is all of us reimagining this like incredibly strange, amazing, beautiful object that's so fascinating
in a broken
different ways
telephone, kind of like exquisite corpse way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because like honestly, like I didn't hear the piece when I started working on it, right? So it's like I had the MIDI file from your composition, and I had a sample library of a Theorbo, and I was trying to approximate what this might end up sounding like, and it was literally like an exquisite corpse. Like I saw the neck part. I didn't see what the head looked like.
Yeah.
To build a torso.
Yeah, and that's sort of like it in a way. There's like a relationship there to like what it is to write a piece of music for an instrument that you don't really know what it sounds like, because you're also kind of, you're making decisions and you're sort of, making instructions happen on page. Well, you sort of have like a vague idea of what it might be, but you really don't know. Like you're just kind of being like, yeah, this is the action that I want you to do right now, Jonathan, and I know that it's going to sound good. Maybe. It's a strange way to work. It's a really composing is weird. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, there was it clearly showed that you had a very strong interest in the instrument and how it worked itself when I first approached playing the piece, because I mean, I hardly think there was anything that was not playable in the first draft, which as a guitarist, you're very used to. I mean, playing an idiomatic instrument, you're very used to people not exactly understanding how the instrument works and making things just unplayable. I mean, some of the greatest repertoire for the classical guitar, if you go to the original manuscript, is written by a composer who not played guitar, and you wouldn't believe it when you hear some guitarists who've adapted it and have edited those scores, and then look at the score and be like, this is actually unplayable. So it does take a lot of thought, and I'm not beating down on these composers, because I mean the music, as I said, is like some of the good music in the repertoire, but there is something to say about really, taking care about the instrument and really thinking about it hard, and that was something that I really appreciated about this piece. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I drew a fretboard in my notebook, and then I obsessively checked everything. So I'm glad that worked out in the end.
So yeah, I mean, you've heard it tonight. Well, you've heard two pieces. As I think one of the comments said, 20% of the theorbo repertoire from the 21st century. There you go. You don't have much more to do. If you're interested, just send me a direct message. I can tell you all of the other pieces for theorbo. There are a couple other good recordings of some new theorbo music, and I hope this can be, become part of the canon. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, does anybody have any closing things to say, or if anyone has any questions to put in, I'll give you a few seconds because I know we're ahead of you in our chat. What comes through on YouTube's about half minute to a minute delayed, so we'll give you a bit of time. We won't cut out on you.
So we'll wait.
Yeah, it's gonna be the video is gonna be hosted on Vimeo. It's gonna be hosted, I guess, Jonathan's and Arie's YouTube's, whatever. It's gonna be all over the internet. We're gonna make TikTok versions of it. We're gonna we're gonna make a dance sequence for it. So there's gonna be America's Got Talent. It's gonna be one of the you have to audition how well you can perform the dance for this piece.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to those.
Those blimps that have the video screens on them?
Yeah, we're bringing back blimps.
Well,
we got all of it. So thank you. Yeah, definitely for staying.
We talking to all the professional sports teams. They have empty stadiums right now, and they only show the big screen during the commercial break. So during the game, the players are all going to see this video. That's the plan, right?
It gets around.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, you'll be able. It'll stay up on YouTube. The video will be uploaded on its own as well, and you'll see it Instagram, Facebook, and on Alex's Vimeo. So yeah, this will be around. We'll make sure you see it all.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much to both of you. This has been such a lovely experience to work with you both.
Thank you for birthing this child for us to change and work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I like to do.
Awesome.
You guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you for including me in this, even though I don't have headphones.
Oh yeah, well.
Such a pleasure.
He's a cool guy over there.
So cold, But yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Well, yeah. So yeah, thanks again to both of you, and thanks for everybody who came out and listened and watched the video. And I hope you really enjoyed this. And again, we'll still be around. You can watch it again. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Bonsoir.
Have a good night. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.